himself runs us through experience. We jump across and go, "Whew, that was hard. I barely made it across." And the next thing he says, jump further. Jump higher. Think bigger. Higher standards. Influence more. Let your vision increase. And after you do that, then is he satisfied? No. A little bit more. A little bit more. I don't know if I can make it anymore. And he encourages you. He fills you with strength. And you go up a little higher. And over a period of lifetime, what is that process called as you grow in Christ? We call it sanctification. What does sanctification mean? In Spanish, have you ever heard of the word Santa? Santa Barbara, Santa Elena, Saint this and Saint that. That comes, of course, from the old Middle Ages terms of saints. But Santa means holy. Sanctification is a process of becoming holy. It's a process of your character being molded into the likeness of Christ. So every time you go through a painful experience, a difficult experience, regardless of how uncomfortable it is, remember, this is part of your training process. It's not just a problem of life. Assuming that you've given your life to Christ. If you haven't given your life to Christ, there's a lot of problems that sinners go to just because they create their own problems. Now, God can still use it for your own good. But in reality, don't many of us create our own problems? What if the devil died today? Would we still be tempted to sin? Or would all temptation disappear? We would still, of our own human nature, be tempted to sin. Those who like the carnal world will still like it tomorrow, even if there's no devil. The devil doesn't have to be very busy with people who are of the world, you know. They, by themselves, they have plenty of work to do. The devil is busy with those that say, "I now belong to Christ." Because once you say you belong to Christ, now he has a job to do. He has a job to discourage you and bring you back as a citizen of his kingdom. So therefore, God gives him certain liberties to be able to tempt you, but never beyond of what you're able. I'm going to discuss a couple of things I went through and what I learned from them. I do remember my hijacking. Some of you might have read the book Mission Pilot. If you haven't read the book Mission Pilot, you can get it at the ABC. I think it was written for your age group. It has, by the way, it has violence in it. It has adventure. It has romance. And it has God written all the way through it. We sat down to design it with the author, Eileen Lantry. When we sat down to design the book, we said, which age group? What's the target group? Young adults. Okay? And what do young adults like? Well, the kind of books that they're attracted to have to have all those components. Okay? It has to have it in it. So when she wrote it, it starts off with the love story from the very beginning. The first chapter is hijacked. But even the chapter hijacked has a love story in it. Because I proposed to my wife when I was 8 years old. And I was so glad when she accepted. And of course, that little puppy love at the beginning ended up being mature love. Later, we met in college, and she wondered if I was still interested, and I wondered if she was still interested. We were kind of embarrassed, man, to think that, oh, well, that girl over there, I proposed to her when I was 8, but she probably doesn't even think of me anymore. But when she told me several other persons were interested in her, and she said, no, I'm already engaged. So she was faithful to her promise. I was very grateful. And I, of course, she was 3 years older than I, but she was 4 years ahead of me in college, in school. So when I was a senior, when I was in 8th grade, she was already a senior in academy. And so the difference between an 8th grader and a senior in academy, that's pretty big. And then when I get into academy, she's already in college. When I looked at her, I thought, she could be one of my student teachers. How embarrassing that I would propose to one of my student teachers. But then as we got older, then eventually we both ended up in college. She was a senior already, ready to graduate, and I was a freshman. And then we decided, let's just take nursing together. And our relationship started to grow. And after we got in the same class, and all of a sudden she wasn't a senior and me a freshman anymore. We were both taking the same courses. She had been taking, another degree. And we decided to temporarily interrupt and go back to school together. So this love story is written all the way through those chapters of difficulty, through assaults by gangs in Lima, Peru. let's look at some of those things. Let me quickly review some of the hijacking experience. My wife and I took our first job. The General Conference offered us 3 jobs, and we accepted the one in Mexico to be a hospital administrator and mission pilot. We went down with the mission airplane. When we landed there, my little daughter, who was 3 years old that very same day, we landed there. The doctor came out, and the lady doctor, and my little girl stood up and said, "Guess what? We're going to work in Mexico." And we were already there. And she'd heard we were going, and then when we landed there, she had no concept of what it is to cross the border. She just knew we were going to work in Mexico. And so the doctor said, "You're already here." "Is that right, Mommy? Are we in Mexico?" And we started our work there with a hospital, a nursing school, and secondary school. A year and a half, 2 years went by. I really enjoyed my work. I thought it was going to be an easy country to work in Mexico. Easy work there because it's our neighbor. And I love working in Mexico, but I discovered the mentality of the government there is more like, in many ways, it's kind of take advantage of all foreigners type of attitude. And whatever they have to do to get money from the foreigners. And so you'd ask a policeman for directions, and he would say, "Just go up the street to the other side." So you go up the street, he sends you up a one-way street, he calls ahead on the radio, and they're waiting for you at the other end to try to find you. So it was all kind of a setup, and I found this is not like South America at all. Mexico was a little bit more difficult to work in. But working with Mexicans was a pleasure. I enjoyed the work, and we used to fly around doing dental work. But one day, as I was coming in for landing, one day the runway was wet. It was a short grass runway. I came in, it was gusting sideways. After I touched down, I had a full airplane, 6 people in the airplane. And when I touched down, I realized that I had no brakes. You see, wet grass is like landing on ice. And I tried to brake, and it was nothing. But then the wind started blowing me toward the trees. And so then I started kind of crabbing sideways a little bit as I slid down the runway. And the wind kept blowing me more toward the trees. So I turned, and pretty soon I was sliding sideways down the runway. And that's a very uncomfortable position. Airplanes aren't made to take those side loads. And then I realized the fence was coming up, and I was going to go right through the fence sideways. And the Lord gave me an idea. Why don't you just turn around a little bit more and add power? So I kicked it around a little bit more, and pretty soon we were sliding backwards. And then I added full power, 300 horses. And we came to stop about 10 feet from the fence. Didn't scratch anything, but everybody was trembling. And I learned a lesson. Short runways and wet grass don't go together. So you can imagine a few months later when it was time to come back. And I came by over the runway and noticed it had 2 inches of water on it. And it was late in the afternoon. There was no time to go to an alternate runway. Another city. So I landed on a nearby road. Not a very trafficked road. Very little traffic. I landed on there and pulled it off the road. Had the night guard sleep in the airplane, expecting the next morning to go get the airplane and bring it over to the school, to the clinic. And so when I did that, when I parked it off and went to bed, the next morning I knock on the door at 6:00. And they said, Capitan, please come to the airplane. There's some soldiers that want to see the documents. All the documents were in order, so I brought everything over, showed it to them. I found out they'd been there all night. So somebody had sent them there to guard the airplane. The poor security guard was inside, locked up. They had knocked on the window. "Hey, you! Come out!" And you know what he said? He didn't want to come out. He said, "I can't. I don't have the key." Well, of course you can come out of an airplane, right? You can always get out. But he told them he couldn't because he was scared of them. So he waited till I got there the next morning, and I acted like I had a key. He said, "Open it up." And I said, "You open it." "No, you open it." So I had to stick the key in and let him out. He said, "Thank you very much." And he was out of there. He was gone. He left me alone with him. And so I showed them the documents. They called. I said, "By the way, how long have you been here?" "All night." "Have you had supper?" "No." "Have you had breakfast?" "No." I sent a truck back to the hospital, brought in 11 trays of food, fed them a breakfast. They were very grateful. A couple hours later, standing around, they finally got orders on the radio, evidently, to take me to an abandoned runway.